Meet Fernan, the heir to the most prosperous family in the Amion Empire. But everyone knew him as something else, a slave to coin. His entire life revolved around amassing wealth, until one day, a bolt of lightning struck him down, and he realized a hostile soul was trying to seize his body. Fernan fought desperately to expel the wandering spirit, but a fragment of it still fused with his being, and with it, a terrifying prophecy of the future appeared. To his horror, Fernan learned he was doomed to lose every last coin and die a beggar on the streets. From that day forward, Fernan vowed to do whatever it took to rewrite his destiny. He would approach the main characters from the prophecy and change the events that were set in stone. Will the wheels of fate crush Fernan as foretold? Or can his desperate struggle forge a new future? Fernan was the heir to the Pelham family, the most powerful house in the Amion Empire, and a student at the Royal Magic Academy. A powerful family, a prestigious education, and a mountain of gold. And everyone in the empire knew he loved money more than life itself. No one could match Fernan's greed and obsession with riches. People had started calling him the money sniffer. This money-crazed madman. No. Fernan continued his daily routine. He reviewed reports from the merchant guild his family ran, berating anyone who failed to meet his expectations. It was a completely ordinary day for Fernan. But as they say, tragedy always strikes when you least expect it. On a day no different from any other, Fernan was walking ahead while listening to a report. He asked irritably when the man would start earning his keep. From behind, Hip casually replied, "Hasn't he been doing better lately?" Hearing this, Fernan nodded in satisfaction. "He has improved, but you still." Before he could finish, he saw something strange in the sky. In the next instant, a bolt of lightning slammed directly into him. As Fernan's consciousness reeled from the shock, a strange soul seized the opportunity to invade his body. A deep voice echoed within Fernan's mind. "What is this?" He glared at the lingering spirit and demanded, "Who are you?" But the soul offered no answer, only a malicious, chilling smile. "Am I about to possess someone?" The words left Fernan stunned, but before he could process them, an invisible hand gripped his head. As the soul rambled on about things he couldn't understand, Fernan instinctively knew it was trying to steal his body. He desperately gathered the last of his mana to attack the intruder, causing the spirit to shriek in agony. "What the? It hurts! Help me!" Fernan didn't care, focusing all his will on destroying the soul, but a piece of it was still absorbed into him. And in that moment, a splitting headache tore through his mind. Strange memories flooded his consciousness. The pain was like a hammer to the skull, forcing a scream from his lips. His mind felt like it was shattering into pieces. Hip rushed to his side, catching him as he fell. "Young master, are you all right?" Fernan didn't answer, because strange lines of text were materializing before his very eyes. A prophecy of the apocalypse swirled in his head. It painted a future far worse than death. Fernan would be exiled from his family for consorting with demons, and he would lose every single coin he had frantically earned. The revelation left Fernan bewildered, but more than that, he was furious. In the days that followed, he tried everything to identify the strange soul. He needed to know why it tried to possess him, and where these cursed memories came from. Even during his lectures at the academy, Fernan's mind was elsewhere. But in the end, he found no clues. After class ended, Fernan packed his books to leave, but his thoughts were still consumed by the prophecy. He was certain the predictions were real. They had been completely accurate, at least up to this point. Because of this, Fernan could use the prophecies to gain an advantage and make a profit. But that brought him no real joy, because if the prophecies were true, it also meant his own catastrophic downfall was drawing closer every single day. He had to verify if the future could truly be changed. After returning home, Hip helped Fernan remove his coat, as usual. Then he asked, "How were your classes today?" Fernan just answered flatly, "The same as always." Hip asked, "Would you like some coffee?" "Yes." Fernan gave a slight nod, then reached for the newspaper on the table. He intently searched the academy section, which Hip found incredibly strange. He asked with concern, "Young master, have you been feeling unwell lately?" Without looking up, Fernan replied coolly, "Not at all." "Then, what is it?" Hip hesitated for a long moment before answering, "I've noticed you seem to be thinking much more than usual." Fernan was a little surprised. He frowned and asked, "Since when?" His attendant answered calmly, "For about 6 months now. Sometimes you just stare into space for a long time. Other times, you make rash decisions. When you used to be so meticulous about every little detail, Hip even suspected it was an after effect of being struck by lightning." Hearing this, Fernan couldn't help but let out a short, bitter laugh. With a mysterious smile, he said, "Those strange decisions. She brought me a stroke of luck in the end." His words only deepened the man's confusion. But Fernan didn't care. His eyes locked onto the name he was searching for in the newspaper. So, he really did enroll. Instantly, Fernan bolted out the door, calling out as he ran, "I have to make a trip down south." The other man had wanted to talk more, but in the blink of an eye, Fernan was gone, leaving him completely frozen. The freshly brewed coffee was left forgotten. The Royal Academy was located on an island called Badian, deep within the Empire's territory. Most of its environment was magically created, and the southern part of the island was a vast wetland. Fernan would soon discover if the prophecies were true. Of all the predictions, 3 were burned into his mind. First, that he would be exiled from his own family. Second, that he would be left with nothing. And third, that he would become a homeless wanderer. The more he thought, the darker his expression grew. He shook his head. Wait, that's not right. Let's recall it again. First, Fernan becomes a homeless outcast. Second, the 72 demons summoned by King Solomon 1,000 years ago will be resurrected. And third, a hero named Amion will save the world from that demonic scourge. Everyone in the Empire knew that name. Of course, Fernan was no exception. He was a descendant of the founding emperor, Kainos Amion. The Amion family had established the empire. Alongside the 5 surrounding kingdoms, 1,000 years had passed, and the family's power had since faded. The prophecy centered on Amion, detailing every event involving him since his academy enrollment. It read like a novel. The best way to verify the prophecy's authenticity was to see if he acted exactly as foretold. That's why Fernan was now riding like the wind toward the place where the prophecy would unfold. Amion wasn't just the main character of a prophecy. He was directly tied to the catastrophic future Fernan might face. What was worse, Fernan had no idea why this hero would become his sworn enemy. He couldn't read the entire prophecy. Some parts were blurred, so he could only grasp the main events. Fernan didn't understand the details of the relationships between the characters. The official reason for his downfall was collaborating with demons, but it sounded absurd. Him, working with demons? A short while later, Fernan reined in his horse in a dense forest. He scanned his surroundings, muttering, "He should be around here somewhere." Searching for a hidden dungeon deep in the swamp. Legend said the founding emperor had placed the soul-bound sword of the first royal knight, Gagner Alan Vaughan, within it. With that thought, Fernan ventured deeper, beginning his search. If the prophecies were true, Amion was the perfect candidate to save the world. A true hero. The thought made Fernan let out a bitter, mocking laugh. If he wasn't so damn important, I'd kill him right now and save myself the trouble. That bastard dares to ruin me. Just then, the thick, coppery smell of blood hit his nose. Fernan's brow furrowed. It was the scent of blood. He then remembered a passage from the prophecy. Amion gets injured by a crocker on his way to the dungeon. It made sense. Even if he was destined to save the world, he was still young. An apex predator like a crocker was far beyond his current abilities. Fernan mused to himself as he followed the blood trail on the ground, which led him to an opening at the base of a tree. He frowned slightly. This is the dungeon entrance? It's exactly as the prophecy described. Now, he just had to see if Amion was inside. As if on cue, the moment the thought crossed his mind, a dirt-streaked young man emerged, his eyes widening in shock upon seeing Fernan. Fernan regained his composure, his voice cool. "Amion, first-year students are not permitted in this area." Hearing his name, Amion asked suspiciously, "Do you know me?" Fernan replied with a calm indifference. "Is there anyone in this empire who doesn't?" Amion considered this. It was true. He then asked, "Sorry, but who are you?" Fernan slowly stated his name, causing Amion to gasp in shock. "Fernan Penbox?" This casual use of his name irritated Fernan, who replied in a cold tone, "You're speaking to me rather informally." Only then did Amion realize his rudeness. He quickly corrected himself. Right, Lord Penbox." Fernan gave no reaction, asking flatly, "Are you injured? Did you run into a lizard man?" Amion shook his head slightly. "It was a crocker." Fernan feigned surprise. "A crocker? Those are incredibly rare. What rotten luck." He then took out a vial and offered it to the bewildered Amion. Fernan explained slowly, "This is a first-class recovery potion. It's 10 times more effective than a low-grade one." Amion's eyes went wide. "A first-class potion? Fernan?" The boy once again used his first name, grating on Fernan's nerves. He corrected him coldly, "It's Lord Penbox." Amion was taken aback by his tone, stammering, I don't have any money," Fernan scoffed. "I don't need your money. Though your family may not hold the power it once did, I believe you will become someone great. The blood of the founding emperor flows through your veins. Just consider it an investment." His words only left Amion more confused than before. This Finan, He was nothing like the money-obsessed demon from the rumors. With that thought, the boy hurriedly expressed his thanks. "Thank you, sir." But he had no idea Fan was dying inside. That potion was absurdly expensive. If it weren't for the prophecy, wild horses couldn't have dragged it out of his hands. Swallowing the bitter taste of regret, Finan continued, "You should count yourself lucky. Back in my day, any student caught sneaking into a restricted area would have been made a very public example of. I'm being incredibly generous. Now, we'll meet again." Enshin bowed deeply in gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I swear I'll repay this debt." With that, Enshin turned and left, but Fanon was hiding just out of sight, watching him. Enshin downed the potion and stepped into the dungeon. A few moments later, Fanan followed him inside. As he walked, he had to admit, despite his lingering doubts, this dungeon was the real deal, and since no traps sprang on him, it meant Unshin had already cleared the way. But something was off. Why couldn't he sense a single drop of mana when the walls were lined with magic lamps? He reached out and grabbed one to inspect it. That's when he realized it was absorbing mana from the air itself. These were permanent magic lamps. So, Ention really just left these priceless artifacts behind? He seemed far more honest and naive than the person described in the prophecy. Is it really safe to leave the world's fate in the hands of someone like him? According to the prophecy, Enshin entered this dungeon while heavily wounded. He supposedly stumbled right through the entrance and was a complete, mud-caked mess. The pain was so intense he couldn't even scream, but Enshin forced back every groan. He chugged all his mana potions to numb the agony, but his wounds refused to close. Even so, he pushed forward. An unseen force was pulling him deeper. A strange, instinctual call he couldn't ignore. Resting on a stone pedestal was a longsword. It looked completely ordinary, yet he couldn't tear his eyes away. It was calling to him. The moment Enshin's hand touched the hilt, a brilliant light exploded outwards, flooding the dark chamber. When Enshin opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the dungeon. He was standing in an alleyway back at the Royal Academy. Finan recalled the prophecy, his brow furrowing as he stared at the pedestal. It was faint, almost gone, but he could still sense the residue of powerful magic. He was certain this was the place. The sword had been right here, and now it had vanished without a trace. This confirmed it. Every word of the prophecy was true, which meant his own future was also set in stone. Exiled from his family, stripped of all his wealth. The thought alone made Fan want to tear his hair out. He gritted his teeth, muttering, "What a twisted, miserable fate." Enchon, the one the Book of Prophecy calls the main character, a hero destined to save the world from demons, and the very man who will bring about Fanan's complete and utter ruin. His mind was a tangled mess just thinking about it. Tapping his fingers on the desk, he began to plot his next move. Still, Ention was a rising stock, a priceless investment. Logically, Fan should be kissing his feet right now, wagging his tail like a loyal dog. But the Enshin from the prophecy was his complete opposite. He was the type to value honor far more than wealth. A reckless approach would surely backfire. So, how should he play this? He couldn't help but sigh. This was a real dilemma. Just then, Hip walked in. "What's a dilemma, sir?" Fanan looked up at him and asked calmly. "Hip, imagine a business venture, an investment that is 100% guaranteed to profit. What would you do?" Hip answered without missing a beat. "I would invest everything," without hesitation. Fanan's brow twitched. "But what if that venture's entire philosophy goes against your own principles?" Hip replied coolly. "Does that matter? After all, you're the one who always says profit is a style that fits everyone." Hip's words hit Fan like a ton of bricks. Hip was right. It doesn't matter if we're talking about demons or the apocalypse. The core principle is the same. High risk, for a ridiculously high return. A clash of personalities? Meaningless, compared to the potential profit. Still, Fanan needed more concrete information on Enshin. With his mind made up, he grabbed his coat. "I'm going to see him. Right now." His sudden action stunned Hip. "See who?" "Sir, you have another appointment arriving soon." But Fanan didn't even look back, already halfway out the door. Hip could only sigh in resignation. He did the same thing yesterday. At the Royal Academy, dorms are assigned by entrance exam rank. Ranks 1 through 10 get into Ravidos Horn. 11 through 30 are placed in Breshorn. And the rest of the failures are dumped into Beste Hall. And for this very reason, the spirit of Gagner was absolutely furious. The moment they arrived at the dorm, he began to rage, a descendant of the great Amion, stuck in this hovel instead of Brez or Ravidos. If the late emperor were still alive, he'd rise from his own grave just to throttle these incompetent fools. Sitting on his bed, engrossed in a book, Enshin asked with a hint of exhaustion, Why do you have to bring demons into this? Gagner scoffed coldly. Because if those blasted demons hadn't interfered, none of this would have happened. Enshan sighed, resigned to his fate. It can't be helped. I was placed here because I was too weak, but Gagner refused to accept it, roaring back. Weak? A descendant of Amion cannot be weak. It's unthinkable. Honestly, Ian said with a dismissive shrug. You could say it's partly the first emperor's fault. Think about it. He abolished the line of succession and replaced it with a system where 7 elector houses choose the emperor. He even donated most of the Amion family's land and assets to the empire. Then, about a century ago, the imperial throne fell to a different elector family. Now, the land is no longer ours. The family fell into ruin, and we even lost parts of our secret sword techniques. I may still hold the title of an elector, but I've never even been properly trained in swordsmanship. Gardner listened, seeing the logic in his words. Even so, you have talent, he stated. I will do everything in my power to help you restore the former glory of the Amion house. As they spoke, a sudden knock echoed from the door, making Ian jump. A low voice called out from the hallway. Entamion, are you in there? Ian signaled for Gardner to be quiet, then called out, Who is it? The person outside replied calmly, Your senior. The word stunned both Ian and Gardner into silence. As if realizing who it must be, Ian moved to open the door. Sure enough, Fernan was standing right outside. He raised an eyebrow and asked with a slight smile, Are you busy? Ian shook his head slightly. No, nothing urgent. Fernan nodded, then casually continued. Good. Then I'd like to borrow a moment of your time. There are too many people here, he suggested. Let's find somewhere quieter. The sudden request caught Ian off guard, but he still agreed. Please give me 10 minutes. I just need to get ready. But Fernan's expression soured. You'd make your senior wait for 10 minutes? He chided, launching into a lecture. The pressure sent Ian into a panic. He quickly corrected himself. 5 minutes. I'll be ready in just 5 minutes. Only then did Fernan nod in satisfaction. He patted Ian's shoulder and said coolly, I'll be waiting in front of the dormitory. With that, he slammed the door shut and stood outside. The moment Fernan was gone, Gardner materialized, complaining, That old-fashioned codger, who was that? Ian slowly explained, That was Fernan Pelham, the eldest son of the Pelham family. Learning Fernan's identity only made Gardner more irritated. That new money family? All they have is wealth, and they dare to summon a descendant of the royal line? But Ian wasn't listening to his complaints. He was lost in thought, wondering what on earth Fernan could possibly want from him. Could he be here for the medicine money? But Ian had already told him that was an investment. Later, at the dormitory lounge, Fernan watched Ian approach and asked with a frown, You brought your sword? Ian sat across from him and answered cautiously, I just feel more at ease holding it. I swear, I don't mean anything by it. Fernan didn't seem to mind much. I understand, he said nonchalantly. Most knights never let their swords out of their sight. As he spoke, his gaze drifted to the blade. It had to be the one containing the ego of Gardner Anfin Parson. While he was pondering this, Ian broke the silence. So, Fernan, why did you want to see me? It's nothing major, Fernan replied casually. I just wanted to have a meal with you. He then pushed the menu on the table toward Ian. Hearing this, Ian immediately shot back in alarm. A meal? Fernan simply nodded. Yes, order whatever you like. But Ian waved his hands in refusal. I'm fine, really. Besides, this place is far too expensive. However, under Fernan's insistent pressure, Ian had no choice but to pick up the menu and choose something, while Fernan silently observed him. He seemed so naive and gentle. How in the world does Fernan end up getting drowned and completely ruined by this kid? The more he thought about it, the more unsettling it was. He suddenly spoke up. Do you have any goals you want to achieve after graduating from the academy? The question made Ian look up, startled. Fernan continued slowly. Most people come to the academy to build connections, but your family avoids all social gatherings, claiming the Amion house needs to be rebuilt. So, I found it strange that someone from your family would even enroll. Ian hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. I'm sick and tired of being looked down on, just for being part of a fallen royal family. We may be nothing but a name now, but the Amion bloodline is still royalty. As he spoke, the look in his eyes began to shift. Fernan didn't miss it. Across from him, Ian declared with unwavering resolve, That's why I will become a royal knight and restore my family's honor. In that moment, Fernan realized something crucial. Ian possessed an iron will and the ambition to back it up. He was proud of his lineage, not nearly as weak as his appearance suggested. And just like that, the two, who had just met, had dinner together for the first time. As night fell, Fernan returned to his quarters. He now had a basic grasp of what kind of person Ian was. His original plan was to play it by ear and lure him in with a sponsorship contract. He was lucky he hadn't made his move too soon. If Fernan had just thrown money at Ian's face, he would have undoubtedly wounded his pride. With someone like that, you had to play a slow, clever game of push and pull. For now, Fernan needed to quietly insert himself into Ian's life, bit by bit, building trust. Eventually, the day would come when Ian needed him. When that moment arrived, all Fernan had to do was reel him in. A big catch. He would turn Ian into an ally, and then bleed him dry. Just then, Hai entered from outside. "Young master, you've returned? Where have you been?" Fernan answered casually. "I was just meeting an acquaintance." Hai frowned slightly and asked, "Was it Bok Chep?" The question made Fernan pause. Why would he bring that person up now? Hai slowly began to explain. "Lunia Boshep. She came today about the debt." Hearing this, Finan looked completely bewildered, asking with a pout, "Wait, that was today?" Damien nodded and continued. "If I had known you would be so late, I would have sent her away immediately. I thought you'd only be a moment, so I asked her to wait. She was here for 3 hours before she left. Lady Bochep must think you're trying to pressure her." Hearing this, a cold smirk crept across Fanan's face. "Even better, isn't it? I went through all the trouble of chaining her down. Now it's time to pull the leash tighter." But the moment those words were spoken, a crippling pain suddenly slammed into his mind, making Fanan flinch. He clutched his head in agony. Seeing this, Damien rushed over in a panic. "Young master, are you all right?" Fanan just shook his head weakly. "It's nothing, just a little headache." But as the words left his lips, something appeared before his very eyes that made his blood run cold. It was a prophecy, a fragment that Fanan had never been able to read before. Why would this part suddenly appear now? The vision before him spoke of a woman with flowing brown hair and sapphire eyes. Her sword was more beautiful and alive than any other. A man named Ian was mesmerized by her sword dance under the moonlight. She possessed enough talent to become a royal knight, but a darkness lingered within her heart. If the chains that bound her were ever shattered, this woman would spread her wings and soar freely into the heavens. And the key to breaking those chains lay with the Pellenberg family. Across from him, Damien watched with growing concern as Fanan stared blankly into space. But he didn't care. If this prophecy was true, he finally understood why Ian would come to despise him. It was all because of this brown-haired girl who would steal Ian's heart. At that realization, Fanon's entire expression darkened. Noticing his master's grim face, Damien moved closer, only to hear him mutter something incomprehensible. "It's not you I'm after." An unsettling silence filled the room. The next morning, in the reception hall of Fanon's residence, a young woman was waiting. It was the very person Fanan had failed to meet yesterday, Lunia Bochep. She was wondering why Fanan would stand her up, only to summon her again today. Clearly, he was the one desperate about the debt, not her. As this thought crossed her mind, Lunia couldn't help but whisper, "Is he trying to grind me into the dust?" At that very moment, Fanan was watching her from outside the room. He scratched his head sheepishly. Even from her back, I can feel her seething with frustration. The house of Count Bochep was once a legendary family that guarded the border. They were the noble protectors of the Northern Empire and one of the 7 elector families. But after a great monster wave swept through and destroyed everything, their legacy of steel was shattered, and their glory faded away. To resurrect their family, the Bocheps sold everything they could. They even parted with the golden edict that certified their elector rights. But it still wasn't enough. Back then, the one who extended a helping hand was Duke Ivan Pellenberg, Fanan's father. Did he do it out of sympathy for the Bocheps' fate? Not a chance. Everything the Duke did was for a specific purpose. The Pellenberg family was notoriously weak in swordsmanship, excelling only in magic. They had always coveted the ultimate sword techniques of others. The Bocheps' tragedy was his perfect opportunity. Ivan blocked other nobles from aiding them, then forced Lunia to take out a colossal loan from his family. This saved the Bochep family from total annihilation, but the compounding interest each year has kept them trapped in a life of misery. If Fanan applied just a little more pressure, they likely would have handed over their secret sword arts. However, Lunia is the woman who will become Ian's future love, revive her family, save the world, and find happiness. He really gets to have it all, doesn't he? At this thought, Fanan heaved a reluctant sigh. Forget it. I don't need their secret sword arts anymore. If Lunia is connected to Ian, the least I can do is make sure she doesn't despise me. With that resolved, Finan pushed open the door and spoke calmly. Lunia Bochep, you've come. Hearing his voice, Lunia immediately turned to face him. Finan ignored her piercing glare, calmly taking the seat opposite her. He said, I apologize for what happened last night. My mind was a mess, and I completely forgot our appointment. I swear it wasn't intentional. But Lunia cut him off with an icy tone. Those in weaker positions must simply endure such injustices. Finan argued with a hint of desperation. I already told you that's not what happened. But Lunia was clearly not convinced. She scoffed and replied, Fine, I'll pretend this never happened. No, it's not about pretending. Finan tried to continue, but Lunia coldly interrupted him again. Then why did you wish to see me? Finan gave up trying to explain, instead putting on a warm smile. I'm sure you can already guess. He had to make a good impression on her, starting now. Operation Win over Lunia. Phase 1 officially begins, Finan stated with calm composure. Starting in our second year, the Magic and Night departments have a joint interdisciplinary class. Before he could even finish his sentence, Lunia flatly rejected him. This clearly annoyed Finan. He pressed his lips together and asked, Do you even know what I was going to propose? She set her teacup down and spoke with complete indifference. You want me to be your project partner, correct? Why should I agree? Lunia saw no benefit in cooperating with him. She was ranked second in her department, while he was merely 10th. She had plenty of much better options. Why be so stubborn? Finan held all the leverage here. He calmly made his offer. If you agree to be my partner for the next 3 years, I will forgive all the interest on your family's debt. His words left Lunia speechless, her eyes widening in disbelief. With a cold smirk, Finan knew victory was in his grasp. He added with a slight sneer, But only if you accept my official patronage. Lunia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would you do this? She demanded. Shrugging nonchalantly, Finan casually replied, Because those joint classes are crucial. Shaking her head, Lunia pressed on. That's not what I'm asking. Why not just a partnership? Why offer patronage? You're aware I'm already on an academy scholarship, aren't you? Finan answered calmly. Of course I am, but you send nearly every coin home. It's no secret that outside the dorms, you live more frugally than any commoner. To him, the patronage was simple. He was merely investing in her immense talent, but Lunia still wasn't convinced. Her brow furrowed in doubt. I've never heard of one noble house sponsoring another. For someone like Lunia Bochep, honor was everything, especially for a noble in poverty. Finan knew her type all too well. He couldn't suppress a scornful smirk. He raised an eyebrow, his voice dripping with condescension. House Pelbuk and House Bochep are both noble. It's true, but that doesn't make us equals, now does it? No matter how fiercely you cling to your honor, compared to a former royal house, you're worthless. His words ignited a spark of fury in Lunia's eyes. Her lips tightened into a thin line. Are you trying to insult me? But Finan held all the cards, a fact he knew all too well. He knew that no matter how much she despised him, she would ultimately have to accept his terms, even if it meant swallowing her grudge against his house. With that thought, a confident smirk played on his lips. This isn't a time for pointless pride, Lunia. And everything I said about your talent was the absolute truth. Phase 2 of his plan to win her over had begun. Finan began to praise her swordsmanship, echoing the very words the prophecy had foretold. Finan's words left Lunia completely stunned. She couldn't even form a response. But he pressed on, praising her relentlessly. He was certain she could never reject someone who truly saw the genius in her abilities. Lunia finally managed a trembling whisper. What? What are you doing? But before she could finish, Finan slammed his hands on the table and shot to his feet. I can never forget the first time I saw your sword dance. And with that, he launched into a passionate tribute to her swordsmanship. It was too much for her to handle. Stop it, she cried out, desperate to make him stop. Don't say another word, please. But Finan stubbornly shook his head. No, I can't possibly stop. Lunia's expression grew darker with every passing second. He leaned in close, his eyes locked on hers. Because I still haven't found words magnificent enough to describe the beauty of your blade. Overwhelmed, she had no choice left but to agree. And just like that, Finan's mission to recruit Lunia was a success. Later, back in Lunia's dormitory, her nanny stared at the contract in her hands, reading the terms in utter disbelief. A 3-year, interest-free loan, personal sponsorship, complete confidentiality until graduation. And in return, you just have to be his partner in the joint club. Lunia gave a small smile. Exactly. The terms were too good to pass up. Besides, he said he sees the potential in my sword dance. At those words, her nanny's eyes went wide. He saw what? She exclaimed. Lunia patiently repeated the word, potential. He said, "My blade was precious, beautiful, noble, and more alive than anything he'd ever seen." A genuine, happy smile graced her lips as she recalled his words. He even said he couldn't find the words to do it justice, but across from her, the nanny's face had grown dark as a storm cloud. She burst out angrily, "That lunatic is definitely scheming something. Still, I'll admit, the boy has a good eye." Lunia sighed, offering a gentle reminder. "Please, be careful what you say, Nanny. He is the heir to House Pelbook, after all." But her nanny wouldn't be stopped. "That Pelbook whelp. Now he's resorting to charming innocent young ladies, is he? He's trying to bewitch you with those intense eyes of his." Faced with her nanny's fury, Lunia replied awkwardly, "It didn't exactly feel like he was trying to bewitch me. But I admit, I'm still wary. Regardless, a 3-year interest-free period is a huge help to my family. I can endure anything for that." The nanny pressed on, still unconvinced. "But you're ranked 2nd in our year, and that Finan is ranked 10th. Just then, a sharp knock came from the door, silencing them both instantly. The nanny went to open it, revealing a person standing in the hall. She frowned. "Yes? What is it?" The visitor replied calmly. "Lord Fernan Pelbook wishes to see Lady Lunia. He says Lord Fernan is waiting at the training grounds and requests her presence as soon as possible." The nanny grumbled under her breath, clearly displeased. Who does he think he is, summoning her like that? Lunia, however, was simply curious. What could Fernan possibly want at the training grounds? She couldn't begin to guess what he was plotting this time. Meanwhile, Fernan was already waiting for her on the field. Lunia was consistently ranked 2nd in her year. The top student of the 2nd-year Knights was Amion, a rival she had never once been able to defeat. And yet, it was rumored she possessed the potential to become one of the 10 legendary royal knights of the continent. The prophecy had claimed as much. Thinking of this, Fernan smiled to himself. He was about to see it with his own eyes, and determine if Lunia was the real deal or just a fraud. Just as the thought crossed his mind, Lunia arrived, sword in hand. She approached him with a wary look. "I don't understand. What's all this about?" Fernan replied coolly. "I would never want you to think that a partnership with me comes with no benefits. I just wanted to prove that I'm your equal." Lunia, stunned for a moment, narrowed her eyes. "Are you saying you want to fight me right here, right now? I'll acknowledge your skill, but the gap between rank 2 and rank 10 is absolute." Fen was completely unfazed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Then let's put that to the test." Seeing his unwavering resolve, Lunia wasted no more words, drawing her blade as she spoke. "As you wish. I'm curious to see what you're really made of. I'll even grant you the first attack." Fen simply smiled and nodded. "Then I'll gladly accept your offer." The moment the words left his lips, his magic staff began to glow with power. Suddenly, shards of rock materialized out of thin air, catching Lunia completely off guard. Across from her, Fen continued his incantation without pause. In the blink of an eye, the stone shards shot toward Lunia like bullets, but she remained perfectly calm, her sword a blur as it deflected each one. Lunia's speed was incredible. She shattered every single projectile in a heartbeat. Without a moment's hesitation, Lunia lunged straight for Fen. The remaining stones shattered in her wake as she moved. In a flash, she had closed the distance between them. But he remained unnervingly calm, his staff still weaving through the air. Suddenly, dark magical energy erupted, engulfing Lunia completely. And in that same instant, Fen appeared directly behind her. The move left her utterly astonished. Ignoring her shocked expression, Fen continued his assault. Instantly, the training ground beneath them began to crack and splinter. Lunia leaped back in a hurry, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you just destroy the training arena?" This floor was magically reinforced. It shouldn't have a single scratch on it. And in that moment, a chilling realization dawned on Lunia. All this time, Fen had been hiding his true power. As she watched in horror, he relentlessly continued his spellcasting. A confident smile never left his face, as if the entire battle was playing out exactly as he'd planned. Debris flew in every direction, and Lunia retreated on pure instinct. She desperately dodged the onslaught, her mind reeling in disbelief, multicasting, and chaining together advanced spells like this. Just how much mana does Fen possess? This was definitely not the power of a mere rank 10. Lunia knew she had completely, fatally, underestimated her opponent. If this kept up, she would undoubtedly lose. With that thought, Lunia unleashed her own mana. A powerful vortex of energy erupted around her, blasting away all the flying debris. Seeing this display, even Fen looked surprised for a moment, but his surprise quickly turned into a grin. A nearby wall began to fracture, Less than 3 seconds later, it completely exploded. Shards of stone, now glowing with mana, hurtled toward Lunia. But she showed no fear as her own blade became enveloped in a brilliant aura. Then, she charged forward once more. Her sword was a whirlwind of steel, shattering every single one of Fen's magical projectiles. But then, something unexpected happened. The staff in Fen's hand suddenly clattered to the ground. Lunia's eyes shot wide open at the sudden action. Her blade froze just inches from Fen's head. He just raised an eyebrow and smiled. "I surrender." Lunia glared, gritting her teeth. "Are you mocking me right now?" Fen gave a casual shrug. "I'm not mocking you. I'm simply out of mana. And how can a mage with no magic left possibly defeat a knight?" Hearing this, Lunia studied him intently. He wasn't faking it. His energy was completely drained. In his current state, there was no way he could win against her. But why did Lunia have such a terrible feeling? This victory felt hollow, not like a victory at all. As she was lost in thought, Fen spoke up again. "Oh, right. I have something for you." As he spoke, a small box materialized in his hand. "Since you're the winner, you like chocolate, right?" he said calmly. Fen explained it was a whiskey chocolate from his family's estate. If that wasn't to her taste, he also had Freed's World tree bark chocolate, or even the Freysia Kingdom's famous Krakenink chocolate. Lunia's brow furrowed, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. A moment later, something clicked. "Did you run a background check on me?" she demanded aggressively. Fen replied, nonchalantly, "I wouldn't go through all that trouble just for you. I simply researched the personal files of all the top-ranking students." Hearing this, Lunia only grew more furious. "That is exactly what a background check is," she yelled, completely exasperated, "giving me chocolate as a prize for a duel. What am I, a child?" She finished with a long, frustrated sigh. Seeing her reaction, Fen assumed she wasn't interested. He started to pull the box back, pouting slightly. "Oh, well, I really thought you'd like it. If you don't want it, I won't force you." But before he could fully retract his hand, Lunia snatched the box away. "I never said I didn't want it," she retorted. Fen nodded, satisfied, and turned to leave. But he only made it 2 steps before Lunia called out to him again. "Wait, Fen glanced back at her, looking puzzled. "What is it?" Lunia's expression was serious. "Your mana reserves are enormous, enough to unleash those devastating attacks one after another. I can't even begin to guess your true limits. With that kind of power, why are you only ranked 10th? The question hung in the air. "Heh." A smirk crept across Fanan's face. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "It's obvious, isn't it? A merchant never truly steps into the light." A short while later, inside Fanan's office, his powerful scepter lay in shattered pieces. Hype stared at the wreckage on the desk, completely bewildered. "My lord, what happened? How did you manage to destroy both the mana storage and the amplifier?" Finan answered casually, "I had a duel with Lunia. She's far stronger than the rumors. Even with all my preparations, everything was utterly annihilated. Not only that, she pushed him to the absolute brink, draining every last drop of his mana." Hype questioned him while gathering the broken crystal shards. "But why would you waste such priceless artifacts just for a sparring match with Lunia Bakchep? Is she truly worth that kind of investment?" "It's an investment in the future," Fanan replied coolly, leaving Hype even more confused. "Could it be? Are the after effects from the lightning strike acting up again?" Fanan didn't answer. His mind was lost in the words of the prophecy. It truly was a beautiful sight. Lunia's swordplay was lightning fast, yet graceful, exuding an air of nobility. Now he finally understood why his father craved the Bakchep clan's secret sword techniques so desperately. Besides, Lunia has undeniable talent. So why has she never taken first place? Could it be a simple matter of poor equipment? While Fanan was lost in thought, Hype was on the verge of a full-blown panic. "My lord, what are you going to tell the Duke?" he pleaded. Obtaining the Bakchep's secret sword art has been his lifelong ambition. Fanan's brow furrowed. I didn't really think about it at the time, but now that you mention it, I am a little concerned. Do you think father will disown me?" Hype just shook his head. "Disown you? No. He'll probably just kill you to get it over with. He can't kill his own son just for ruining a plan. Right?" Regardless, Fanan decided to write to his father and give him a heads up. He would explain the Bakchep situation and await a reply. As he finished the letter, he could vividly picture his father clutching his chest and collapsing from pure rage. A wave of dreadful premonitions washed over him, but Fanan forced himself to ignore them and push the thoughts away. A few days later, the reply arrived. Fanan's face darkened as he read it. That was faster than I expected. Hype nodded with a heavy sigh. Yes, my lord. The inevitable has finally happened. Finan glanced at him sharply. Did father leave any private message for me? Hype shook his head mournfully. He did not. Seeing the look on his attendant's face, Finan grew uneasy. Then why do you look like that? Hype let out a defeated sigh. Because I have a feeling that today will be my last day serving you. Young Master Fan, and scoffed in disbelief. How could this possibly be the reason he gets disowned? He remembered the prophecy clearly. He was supposed to be cast out for making a pact with a demon. This incident has nothing to do with demons, so it should be fine. But the letter read, "You have been possessed by a demon." At that thought, a sudden sharp laugh escaped Fanon's lips. Hype, I must see my father, immediately. With that, Fanan headed for Yon's castle. As he walked, his mind raced. He couldn't reveal the existence of the Book of Prophecy. He was soon greeted by Yon's closest aide. Fanon followed the man deeper into the castle. A prophecy isn't a physical object. There's no way to prove a book that only exists in his mind. If he tried to explain, his father would either think he'd lost his mind or that he was spouting delusional fantasies. He might even accuse him of trying to ruin the family's name. No. He had to offer something else. Something to compensate for the loss of the Bakchep deal. Moments later, he was ushered into Yon's study. His father was at his desk and looked up as he entered. You're calmer than I expected. I thought you might have taken something and lost your senses. Or perhaps the demon destroyed by the last emperor has returned and possessed my son. If it's neither of those, then you will explain your actions. Fanan stood before him, his voice steady. I decided to invest in the Bakchep family in a more profitable way. Yon's brow furrowed. More profitable than their secret sword arts? Fanon's reply was unwavering. That, I cannot say. A cold fury entered Yon's eyes. Fanan, this is not a request. Right now, you are a criminal. A child squandering the family's fortune. I am aware, Fanan answered with a cold nod. However, my position hasn't changed. If you entrust the entire Bakchep matter to me, I am confident I can yield a return far greater than any sword manual. Yon's expression darkened, his voice dropping low. Is that so? Then let me ask you again. From where does this confidence come? Fanan simply shook his head. I cannot say. The answer made Yon's anger flare. Ridiculous! I never raised you to be so impulsive. Do you not understand that this isn't some childish tantrum that can be solved with a few simple words? Hearing the clear warning in his father's voice, Fanan sighed. It's just as I predicted. It seems I have no choice but to bargain with the prophecy. He didn't want to play this card so soon, but now his back was against the wall. After a moment, he met his father's gaze. This isn't a tantrum. In exchange for taking full responsibility for the Bakchep affair, I will provide you with information that only I possess. At this, Yon stopped writing, his eyes narrowing. Information that only you possess? Fanan gave a slight, emotionless nod. Yes, father. I'm aware you have your own intelligence network, Yon said, narrowing his eyes. But I highly doubt it's anything more than children playing make-believe. Still, go on. What is this grand piece of information? Taking a deep breath, Fernan spoke calmly. West of the Eris mountain range, within Viscount Dawn's territory, lies an undiscovered magic stone mine. Yon's brows furrowed deeply as he asked in a low voice, A magic stone mine? I've never heard of one in that region. How did you find out about this? My immature intelligence network is just like a bunch of kids digging in the dirt. With a faint smile, Fernan continued. But it's children who are always digging. And sometimes, they happen to unearth a coin buried long ago. That mine in the Aris range is more than enough to cover the Bakchep losses, with a mountain of gold to spare. Hearing this, Yon was stunned into silence. Magic stones, ores brimming with mana, were among the most valuable minerals in existence. They created wealth. Immense wealth. However, the magic stone mine in the Arus range was only mentioned vaguely in a prophecy. There were absolutely no specific details about it. Fernan had never seen it himself, so he had no idea of its scale. But at the very least, it was enough to buy him more time. With that thought, Fernan spoke again, his voice steady. A cargo shipment operated by House Donist was just sunk in a storm. Their financial situation is anything but stable. If we cleverly seize this opportunity, we can claim the mining rights. As for the prophecy being discovered, it's best we delay its reveal for as long as possible. These words sent Yon into a deep silence. After a long moment, he finally spoke. If what you say is true, it might be enough to compensate for the damage you've caused, but it still needs to be verified. For now, go back and focus on your studies. When we have the results, I will summon you. Fernan nodded in agreement at his words, then turned and walked away. He let out a quiet sigh of relief. He'd managed to douse his father's fury, but he felt like he'd just lost 10 years off his life. But just as Fernan relaxed, Jan's deep voice called out from behind him. The sound made him flinch. Fernan glanced back. Yes, father? His heart was now pounding in his chest. What had he done wrong now? But Jan remained silent, simply staring intently at Fernan. Just when he thought his father wouldn't say anything, he suddenly spoke. Since you're here, let's have a meal. I can't just send you away. Startled by the offer, he replied, Ah, yes, of course. Immediately after, Fernan closed the door and left. Now, only Jan and his trusted aide remained in the room. A moment later, Jan spoke in a low tone. I'm a bit disappointed in you. Even the black turtle couldn't uncover what he found. His aide immediately replied, My deepest apologies. I will have everything Jan waved it off, saying calmly, Don't be so hard on them. Take your time. More importantly, what are your thoughts on Fernan? Jan's aide frowned slightly. You're planning to do business with the young master. You've become quite the merchant yourself, my lord. With a faint chuckle, Jan spoke nonchalantly. But I still can't figure out how he managed to find a magic stone mine. We'll find out eventually. He might have a group that specializes in investigating mineral veins. The aide's brow furrowed at the suggestion. You mean the golden pillars? Giving a slight nod, Jan smirked. The taste of profit generated from minerals. That's why, despite his talent for fire magic, he chose to become an earth mage. Of course, Jan still needed to verify the information first. The aide hesitated before speaking. But it's possible the young master truly possesses the golden pillars, and has even developed the organization to the point where they can track mineral veins. Hearing this, Jan's lips curled into a slight smile. That boy has been obsessed with minerals since he was a child. He never expected his son would accomplish something like this. As he spoke, Jan seemed to recall something else and gave a stern command. Also, thoroughly investigate that girl, Lunia Bochep. I want to know exactly what she did to seduce my son, Fernan. The aide took the paper from his hand, asking with confusion, Are you suggesting the young master has fallen for Lunia Bochep? Jan offered no explanation, simply ordering in a cold voice, My decision is made. Get it done. No profit means no investment. But if there is profit, you must go all in. You could even sell your... And if he invested for no clear reason, it means something else has captured Fernan's attention. If it's not the folly of young love, then what else could it be? At this thought, Jan couldn't help but chuckle before continuing. But I have a feeling that's not the whole story. That money-grubbing kid. What is he really after? The next day, at the academy dormitory, Lunia was eating ice cream. Fernan sat across from her and asked with a puzzled look, Alia Toega is partnering with Carlos Denva? She nodded slightly. Yep. Carlos chose Alia right after I said I'd be your classmate. Fernan's brow furrowed as he pressed. Alia Toega. She's ranked 4th in the night department, right? Lunia nodded nonchalantly. Yeah. She used to be 5th, but she's improved dramatically. A small smile played on Fernan's lips. So, you told Carlos Denva you were partnering with me? The rumor's already out. There's no point in hiding it. Lunia answered coolly, scooping her ice cream. Everyone's going to find out eventually. People are saying you're only with Fernan for his money. Anyone could see that coming. She'll just have to learn to deal with it, since it's not entirely untrue. Hearing her confession, a smirk crept across Fernan's face. It's true. I really do love money. There's nothing I wouldn't do. Across from him, Lunia sighed with a sense of resignation. Incredible. No wonder everyone calls you a money grubber. But that's exactly why she hated him. As Lunia was lost in thought, Fernan's voice suddenly cut in. Here, take this. The sudden gesture startled her. Glancing over, she saw a small box and an envelope sitting on the table. Lunia asked suspiciously, What is this? Fernan replied nonchalantly, An elixir and an exchange voucher. This elixir was brewed from the root of a mandrake. As for the voucher, you can take it to the armory managed by Fernan's company. You can use it to trade for high-end equipment. Hearing this, Lunia's brow furrowed as she spoke in a low voice. There's no way I can pay you back for this. Fernan's eyes narrowed as he stared her down, his voice deepening. Have you already forgotten the contract we signed? At his words, Lunia looked up, her voice wavering. Even so, giving me items made by the Golden Tortoise Merchant Guild. This goes far beyond what I can accept as a gift. Don't you think you're going too far? Her words seemed to make Fernan a bit uncomfortable. Seeing his expression, Lunia sighed and said, Judging by your reaction, it seems you know it too. Fernan awkwardly shook his head. No, you're right. It is excessive. But if this is the price to win Lunia's favor and avoid a future as a beggar, it's dirt cheap. And if her strength could help in the fight against demons, it would be more than worth it. So Fernan brought up the contract as a warning. Refusing sponsorship is a breach of contract, which is grounds for termination. The penalty fee would be. Before he could finish, Lunia cut him off coldly. All right, I'll take it. Satisfied, Fernan stood up. Good, I'll see you in class. I have something to take care of, so I'll be along shortly. And with that, he left. Lunia stared at the items on the table, completely speechless. Even for a sponsorship, this was obscenely expensive. She wondered if the contract even had a penalty clause. Does it? It can't, right? There's no way. In that moment, Lunia had a shocking realization. Fernan had just lied to force these priceless items on her. Is he really trying to seduce me just to steal my family's sword techniques, like Nanny said? He can try, but he shouldn't dream of ever succeeding. Elsewhere, Fernan stood on a corridor balcony, thinking as he scanned the view. He should be in this class by now. Where could he be? It didn't take long for him to spot the person standing down below. The first class for the freshman knight cadets was Warfare and Combat Practice, a course famous for gauging students' power through friendly duels. According to the prophecy, ever since he acquired the sword containing Gagnar's soul, that boy began to shine and make a name for himself. And his journey to become the world's savior officially begins from this very moment. Just then, a voice suddenly called out from behind. Who's that down there? Fernan turned to the voice and saw a young, blonde-haired man smiling at him. I never expected to find Fernan Penbach here. Fernan put on a warm smile and asked, How have you been? Your Highness. The young man clapped a hand on his shoulder, laughing. Forget your Highness. It's been ages. Why are you being so formal? Fernan replied with polite decorum. One must give a proper greeting, no? Ignoring him, the young man asked curiously. So, what's happening? Have you got your eye on a new student? Fernan dodged the question, answering vaguely, I always keep a close watch on the top-ranked students. What about you? Are you here because of Enshin? At the sound of that name, the young man froze for an instant. A moment later, he smirked and said, Of course. He is from the old royal family after all. For 100 years, no one from House Amion has set foot in the academy. His enrollment is bound to create some curiosity, don't you think? This young man was Luger Swaben, the second prince of the current empire from the royal house of Swaben. The Swabens have held the throne for 3 generations, ever since being elected as the royal family 100 years ago. They share the same roots as the Amions, but now, the relationship between the old royal family and the current one had become incredibly strained. Furthermore, Luger was a man who prized power above all else, and wanted the Swaben line to continue its reign. The very existence of someone with a more legitimate bloodline was a significant threat. At that moment, Luger spoke again. But my guess is, he's also very curious about Enshin. As he spoke, his eyes shifted toward another person. Fernan frowned and asked, Who? The one Luger was watching was a red-haired young man, Varen Kanbuner. Luger spoke slowly. He entered the Knight Academy with the second highest ranking. The Kanbuner family is looking for an opportunity to replace the Amions and become one of the 7 elector families. That's why he's been staring daggers at Enshan this entire time. Hearing this, Fernan fell into a thoughtful silence. What a coincidence. The relationship between Luger and Varen. It probably begins right here. In every hero's saga, there is always a villain whom the main character must overcome in order to grow. According to prophecy, Varen Kalbunder was the fated obstacle for the coming hero. At that moment, the instructor's voice boomed. Anton's down. Ian, you're next. From the stands above, Finan watched the unfolding scene with keen interest. And so, the true beginning of Ian's heroic journey was about to unfold. Could this also be destiny? How interesting. As he was lost in thought, the instructor ordered the match to begin. Now, let's see how it all went down. How exactly did Ian snatch victory from Anton, earning the crowd's thunderous cheers? In that single moment, the name Ian Amon was forever seared into the minds of every student and instructor. Naturally, his rise to prominence attracted the attention of his enemies, namely Varen and Luer. They wanted to witness the power of their new rival for themselves. They needed to know his true strength, and whether this prophecy would prove Fanon's gamble on Ian was the right choice. As the crowd waited with bated breath, the instructor roared, Begin! The student named Anton narrowed his eyes, glaring at Ian from across the arena. Without a shred of hesitation, he charged forward. Caught completely off guard, Ian scrambled to raise his sword, barely blocking Anton's attack. For a tense moment, they were locked in a stalemate. But then, Ian suddenly launched himself into the air, dodging Anton's next strike. The second his feet hit the ground, Ian created distance between them. He used this chance to gasp for breath. From the balcony above, Lure watched and commented, "I heard the matchups for this class are completely random. That kid's got some rotten luck." Anton ranked 10th on the entrance exam, while Ian was all the way down at 38th. This opponent is way out of his league. With a look of fake pity, Lure continued, "But, to be cornered so easily, well, what can you expect from number 38? I had no hope for him anyway. This match is a total bore. There's nothing left to see here. I'm leaving." With that, he clapped Finan on the shoulder as a farewell. But just then, Finan replied with a mysterious smile, "I wouldn't say there's nothing to see." As if on cue, Ian made his move. A flash of light from his blade sliced across Anton's chest, severing the emblem from his uniform. In an instant, Anton's face became a mask of pure fury. Seeing the rage in his eyes, Ian felt a jolt of panic. Varan, who was also watching the fight, was taken aback. For Ian to force Anton back with a single blow was completely unexpected. Up above, however, Finan had predicted this all along. Ian was clearly overwhelmed by the ferocity of the initial attack. His panic was a clear sign of his inexperience, but Finan knew that once he regained his cool and countered, the tide of battle would instantly shift. Down in the arena, Anton looked like a demon, snarling through clenched teeth. "You think a pathetic rank 38 like you can actually defeat me?" The words had barely left his lips when a powerful aura of mana erupted around him, forming a violent vortex that shot straight towards Ian. Seeing this, the entire crowd began to murmur in shock. "He's doing better than I thought, but Anton will still win, right? In any case, just lasting this long has saved some face for the royal family." Lure sneered from the balcony. "I never thought a rank 38 could force a rank 10 to use his trump card. I suppose he's at least worthy of the Amion family name. For someone so talentless to try this hard, it's almost commendable." Hearing this, Finan couldn't help but let out a short laugh. Talentless? Ian? Impossible. It's not that Ian lacks ability, it's that his environment never gave him a chance to grow. At that same moment, a furious Anton charged madly toward Ian. But this time, Ian showed no fear, calmly raising his sword to meet the attack. Clang! The sound of steel crashing against steel rang out. In a flash, deadly arcs of light danced through the air. They exchanged several more blows. Watching them, Finan was filled with emotion. He truly is special. He is the one chosen by prophecy, the main character of this world. And in that very instant, Ian vanished without a trace, leaving a stunned Anton completely exposed. Seeing this, even Lure's eyes widened in surprise. But regardless of the crowd's shock, Ian reappeared behind Anton in a flash of lightning. From the sidelines, Varan stared in utter disbelief. While everyone was still reeling, Anton's sword flew into the air, and he collapsed to the ground. The instructor immediately announced, "The winner is Ian Amion." Hearing those words, Ian's eyes lit up with victory. The entire crowd erupted into a flurry of excited whispers. Varan, on the other hand, could only watch, his heart burning with jealousy. Finan, of course, was delighted. The prophecy was real, and his bet had paid off. Now, he just had to nurture Ian and make him a powerful ally. Next on his agenda, recruiting Luna. A while later, in one of the Academy's lecture halls, the air was buzzing with some shocking new gossip. Are they actually a couple? The subjects of the rumor were none other than Finan and Luna. Finan sighed in frustration. "This is a pain. We're drawing too much attention." Luna, however, was perfectly calm. "Just ignore them," she said coolly. "They'll stop eventually." Finan was just making conversation anyway. He raised an eyebrow and asked, "Did you drink the Elysia I gave you? What about the new equipment? Do you like it?" At his question, Luna fell silent. She remembered the pure excitement she felt when she first tried on the new gear. After drinking the potion, her power had surged, and she'd been overjoyed. But remembering her giddy expression, Luna forced herself to lie, "Yeah, it's not too bad." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the platform, followed by a woman's crystal-clear voice. "Is everyone present? It seems you've all found a partner. No one was late, I hope?" Everyone immediately looked up to see two instructors, one male and one female, approaching them. The female instructor introduced herself first. "I am Professor Rosalia of the Magic Department, and as you know, this is Professor GR of the Night Department. From now on, our two departments will hold joint classes. Now then, let's begin the lesson." The teaching assistant started handing out maps to the students. At that moment, Rosalia conjured a magical display on the table and spoke. "Your first lesson will be an outdoor practical exercise." GR, standing beside her, nodded in agreement. "Nothing tests your knowledge better than actual combat. You will now be thrown into a live field test. A destination was marked on the map. Their only job was to reach that point within 4 hours. However, they couldn't arrive too early, nor too late. They had to arrive in exactly 4 hours, at precisely 2 p.m. With the explanation finished, GR asked, "Are there any questions?" Immediately, a student raised his hand. "Does this count towards our grade?" GR slowly opened his mouth to reply. "This is the most important assessment besides the midterm and final exams." Someone else asked if fighting was permitted. Rosalia let out a soft chuckle. "If you manage to capture other students, you'll receive bonus points." After that answer, no more students had questions. Rosalia spoke up again. "If there are no further questions, let's begin immediately." Her words sent a wave of shock through the students, but before they could even process it, Rosalia's magic enveloped them all. Her cheerful voice ringing out, "Well then, I wish you all the best of luck." When the students opened their eyes again, they found themselves in a desolate wasteland. Fernan and Lunia were, of course, together. They climbed a cliff, and Fernan scanned the surroundings, muttering in confusion, "Where are we?" Lunia replied coolly, "That's what we have to figure out for ourselves. First, let's check the map." But they had barely taken 2 steps before running into 2 other students. Fernan recognized them, whispering, "Jane Hux and Net Palen. Aren't they both ranked outside the top 70? Lunia glanced at him and asked, "What's the plan?" Fernan's voice was cold. "Is there any reason to waste our time on such low-ranked trash?" Jen and Net, the very trash he was talking about, looked offended. But Fernan didn't care, continuing, "Normally, I'd say that and walk away, but this time, I'll follow your lead completely." Hearing this, Lunia's eyes lit up instantly. In the next moment, she drew her sword, declaring, "Then first, after we earn some bonus points, we'll check the map and find our current location." Upon hearing her plan, Fernan suggested, "Wouldn't it be easier to just use a spell?" Lunia frowned at him. "Is there a spell that can pinpoint our location?" While they were talking, Net leaned in and whispered to Jen, "Now's our chance, run." But before they could move, Lunia had already spotted them. She somersaulted, landing right in front of them, her voice icy. "We need those bonus points. Where do you two think you're going?" Seeing Lunia, Jen, and Net's faces turned pale, as if they'd stepped in something foul. Too bad for them, Lunia didn't care. A single slash, brimming with energy, crashed down and pinned them both. Even with their support magic activated, they stood no chance. After making short work of the pair, Fernan and Lunia casually walked away, chatting as they went. They showed no concern that the trash they just defeated might feel humiliated. Meanwhile, back in the lecture hall, an announcement confirmed Jen and Net's defeat. GR sighed. "Another team is out. They're getting eliminated faster than I expected." Rosalia chuckled softly. "It is strange, isn't it? Not a single student has been defeated by monsters. Every elimination has been from conflict with each other." GR walked over to her side, asking in a low voice, "Professor Rosalia, are there any pairs you're paying special attention to this time?" Rosalia answered calmly. "Looking at the scores alone, the pair of Lair and Alon is the strongest. Carlos and Alia are also worth watching. But the pair I have my eye on is, without a doubt, Lunia and Fernan." Hearing this, GR raised an eyebrow. That pair is certainly causing a stir. He felt Lunia was at a disadvantage being paired with Fernan. Could it be for money? But he didn't think Fernan cared at all about his grades. Hearing this, Rosalia couldn't help but let out a small laugh. "Perhaps there's another reason he chose to partner with Lunia?" GR asked, a bit confused. "It's not for the points?" Rosalia put on a mysterious expression, a smirk playing on her lips. "That's right. Because Fernan is a student who can raise his score whenever he wants to, without needing to pair up with anyone." At this, GR became even more confused. "He can raise his score whenever he wants? What do you mean by that?" Rosalia replied nonchalantly, "Fernan is always ranked 10th. No higher, no lower. It's common for talented students to be at the top, but holding the exact 10th rank is unusual. Furthermore, Fernan's theory scores are nearly perfect, but he consistently loses just enough points in practical exercises to stay within the Rabidus building." Rosalia had thought he was just the type who didn't like to stand out. GR frowned, deep in thought, until the realization finally hit him. "So, does that mean model, that guy, Fernan? He's deliberately hiding his true power." Damn Mac nodded. Rosalia then chimed in casually, "Exactly. Remember how the training grounds were obliterated recently? The professors were scrambling to find the culprit. Turns out it was Fernan and Lunia all along." Grat shouted in disbelief. "What? They're the ones who wrecked the entire training field?" Rosalia calmly confirmed, "They are. which only makes me more curious. Grat frowned at her, asking, "About what? Why Fernan is hiding his strength?" With a faint smile, Rosalia shook her head. "No. It's why he's decided to stop hiding it now." At that very moment, Fernan was oblivious to their watchful eyes. He stood on a high cliff, calmly studying a map. The marked destination on the map was the northern coastline. "I think my current position is somewhere around here." But from the base of the cliff, piercing screams echoed upwards. He paid them no mind, continuing to get his bearings. A moment later, Lunia's voice yelled from below, "We're done over here. How about you? Have you pinpointed our destination yet?" Fernan leaped down from the cliff's edge, slowly opening his mouth to speak. "I have. We just need to head northeast. We passed quite a few people on the way. Want to hunt down the next pair now?" Lunia nodded slightly. "Yeah. We still have plenty of time. I think we should use it to rack up more bonus points." Just then, a surge of mana suddenly shot towards them from above. Luckily, Fernan managed to cast a defensive spell just in time. At the same time, a mocking voice rang out, Well, fancy meeting you two here?" Fernan and Lunia quickly glanced over, seeing a man and a woman approaching. Lunia glared at them, shouting angrily, "Carlos Denov, do you call a sneak attack from behind honorable?" Hearing this, Carlos wasn't bothered in the slightest. He sneered. "In a real battle, there's no such thing as a dirty trick. Did you forget the professor said this was a live combat exercise? Did you really think I'd let you go so easily after running into you this early?" The moment he finished speaking, he immediately began conjuring a spell in his hands. "On the other side," Lunia asked, confused, "why is Carlos Denov so furious?" Fernan thought for a second before answering. "He begged you to be his partner, didn't he? His pride must be wounded because I swooped in and took you instead." The two of them were openly mocking him, paying no attention to Carlos whatsoever. Their entire conversation reached his ears, leaving him completely dumbfounded. But Fernan didn't care, adding more fuel to the fire. So childish, holding a grudge over something so petty. At this point, Carlos couldn't take it anymore, and roared, "Enough trash talk. Let's fight." Seeing him get more and more agitated, Fernan spoke with a sigh of resignation. "It seems this battle is unavoidable." But Lunia just grinned happily. "That's even better. The bonus points will be higher. But you can't just stand on the sidelines and watch this time." Fernan gave a firm nod. "I know. I'll support you. So feel free to go all out." Lunia gave him a look of deep distrust, pouting as she said, "Don't overdo it. You and I have zero coordination. How are you supposed to support me?" With a soft chuckle, Fernan raised an eyebrow cockily. "We're a pair. Fighting alone would be meaningless, wouldn't it?" As he spoke, he unleashed his magic. The surrounding earth and rock were instantly enveloped in a massive amount of mana, levitating into the air before closing in on Carlos and his partner. Witnessing this spectacle, the faces of the other two immediately filled with panic. Fernan spun the magic staff in his hand, smiling confidently. "Don't worry, just trust me." Meanwhile, far away, Rosalia had already sensed the disturbance. She exclaimed with excitement, "It seems like a pretty big battle is happening over there." "That's the Western Mountain region." Grat frowned, murmuring in confusion. "Have the students already started fighting monsters?" But Rosalia shook her head. "Monsters don't spawn in that area. Let's get a closer look." She immediately cast a spell, extending her vision toward the disturbance. Once the image cleared, Grat shouted excitedly, "It looks like the two pairs Professor Rosalia just mentioned have finally clashed." Rosalia's voice filled with anticipation. "This is going to be good. Fernan, I'm finally going to witness your true power with my own eyes." At that moment, in the Western Mountains, shockwaves from colliding mana erupted relentlessly. The air was thick with magic, sending rocks and debris flying everywhere. Lunia took charge of the frontal assault, but while clashing with Alia, Lunia suddenly noticed something. Her body felt unusually light. Realizing this, a possibility flashed through her mind. It had to be Fernan's support magic. But the crucial question was, when did he even cast it? To think he still had time to cast a buff spell in the middle of a fight. It was almost unbelievable. Sensing Lunia's gaze on him, Fernan winked and grinned. "Pretty cool, right?" Seeing his smug expression left Lunia speechless. It was better to just focus on the battle. With that, she charged forward ferociously, deciding she had to eliminate Alia first. But just then, a bolt of lightning suddenly struck down from the sky. However, it had little effect on the fight between Lunia and Alia, because Fernan's magic was already there to support her. Seeing his attack fail, Carlos grew annoyed and unleashed another lightning bolt. This time, it looped around in a wide arc, successfully reaching Lunia's position before binding her tightly. Trapped. Even her sword hand was pinned down. Lunia bit her lip in fury, her body completely immobilized. Seeing this, Alia cried out in triumph, "I've got you now, Lunia." But Lunia suddenly roared, "This is nothing. If I just unleash my full power." Before she could finish, Alia charged forward with her sword. In that exact moment, a blinding golden light flashed into existence. When the light faded, only a large rock remained where Lunia had stood. Alia's eyes widened in shock. A rock? What just happened? And where was Lunia? She had been pulled right beside Fernan. It wasn't just Alia. Lunia herself was completely bewildered. She frowned at Fernan, demanding, "What was that?" With a soft chuckle, Fernan casually explained, "Ah, it's a new magic spell my family discovered. Seemed useful, so I learned it. It lets you swap two objects of the same weight." Understanding dawned on Lunia, but she quickly realized something was wrong. She confronted him aggressively. "How in the world did you know my weight?" Fernan replied nonchalantly, "It was in your student file. And that rock, it looks heavier than it actually is." But as they were talking, another bolt of lightning struck from the heavens. With lightning-fast reflexes, Lunia lifted Fernan into the air to dodge. After they landed safely, Lunia spoke through a cold sneer. "We'll discuss this in detail later. As for that file, I'm burning it to ashes." As she spoke, she yanked on Fernan's shirt, making him cry out in pain. "Please be gentle. Would it kill you to carry me properly and put me down softly?" But another lightning bolt crashed down, forcing them to leap apart to evade it. Lunia then made a suggestion. "I'll handle Alia. You focus on stopping Carlos Los." Fernan sighed, resigned. "I wonder how many more times I'll have to roll around on the ground today." He then reached down to grab his staff. But as he looked up, Fernan saw a pillar of light descending right on top of him. Yet he wasn't afraid. A smirk played on his lips. "That Carlos Los. I was wondering when he'd finally pull out that move." Carlos's signature attack was summoning a rain of thunderbolts, and a giant pillar of light created from dozens of strikes at once. It was a multicast spell, with destructive power far beyond any student's level. It's why he was the top of the Knight's division, until Fernan revealed his true power. He raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Let's see. I've researched a way to block this. Now's the perfect time to test just how effective it is." As soon as he finished speaking, two blue spheres of energy appeared in Fernan's hands. He immediately threw them, beginning a new incantation. On the other side, Carlos Los was also casting his magic, trying to overwhelm Fernan with lightning, but suddenly, he noticed something strange. Lunia was just as startled as another brilliant flash tore through the sky. Carlos Los's lightning bolts were suddenly dispersed, and thunderous roars echoed across the battlefield. Dust and smoke instantly billowed everywhere. But through the hazy mist, a single figure remained standing firm. Fernan raised an eyebrow at his opponent, his eyes filled with defiance. Seeing this, Carlos Los roared in absolute fury. "You blocked it? Impossible. How could you?" Before he could finish his tirade, Fernan took pity on him and explained, "This is a storage device capable of absorbing magical energy. Of course, I made a few modifications myself. It was expensive and difficult to craft, but the results are pretty decent, don't you think?" If Fernan refined it a bit more and successfully mass-produced it, this item could definitely be sold on the market. His words made Carlos Los's face turn purple with rage. He pointed accusingly. "Using artifacts is cowardly. That's cheating." With a careless shrug, Fernan retorted, "What's cowardly about combat? Have you forgotten this is a practical exam?" The words sounded eerily familiar to Carlos. Weren't those the exact words he'd just said to Lunia? He had just been beaten with his own logic. Just then, Fernan suddenly called out to Lunia. That's when Carlos remembered the real problem. There was still another opponent. He frantically whipped his head around, but it was too late. Fernan's voice dropped low and serious. "End this now." Instantly, Lunia focused her mana into her blade to strike. A beam of sword light, pulsing with immense power, slashed down and forced Alia back. At the same time, on a nearby cliff, two figures watched in secret. It was Anne and Luther. Luther spoke with a casual smile. And then there were two, and nodded in agreement. Which means someone has been eliminated. The teaching assistants will immediately teleport any defeated students to the finish line. No student-level mage should be able to block Carlos Los's lightning spell. Fernan and Lunia have some really bad luck, but Luther just gave a cold laugh. "No, you're forgetting. This is Fernan and Lunia. Fernan hates standing out, so he's always hidden his true strength. But ever since he paired up with Lunia, he can't hide anymore. He's forced to match Lunia's pace. A woman completely obsessed with her scores. If he unleashes his full power, his ranking will definitely skyrocket. In my circle, The second my ranking drops even a little, they'll all rush in to crush me. That's why I can't allow a potential rival like him to keep growing." As he spoke, he looked down at the battle below and proposed, "As long as, follow me, and I'll get you to the designated point safely. As promised, you'll earn a high rank in this exam. However, one pair must be eliminated before the finish line." So he ordered the capture of Lunia and Fernan. Meanwhile, after dealing with Carlos's team, Fernan and Lunia set off in a new direction. They encountered plenty of monsters along the way, but Lunia annihilated every last one. After finishing another beast, she pulled her sword from its corpse. Lunia then whispered, "We're getting close to the finish line, and the monsters are spawning more frequently. At this pace, we'll make it in time. We might even take first place." But when she finished speaking, silence was her only answer. She glanced over and saw Fernan fiddling with something. Lunia frowned and asked, "Do you really think that's necessary right now?" Fernan didn't stop, replying as he worked, "Giant's blood is a key ingredient for crafting recovery potions." Lunia sighed in exasperation. "I know that, but compared to your family's fortune, this stuff is just pocket change." Fernan casually replied, "Pocket change is still money." She pouted at his answer. "So that's why everyone calls you a money grubber." Fernan paid her no mind, laughing it off. "Well, thanks to that, I was able to recruit you. I'd say it was a pretty good investment." Lunia decided not to argue further and urged him, "If you're done, let's get going." Fernan nodded slightly, then asked curiously, "How many have we taken down? 7 or 8 pairs?" Lunia answered coolly, 8 pairs. I'm expecting a hefty bonus for this." Hearing that, Fernan let out a helpless sigh. "You're completely obsessed with your score." Lunia shot back with a cold snort. "Better than being obsessed with money. Besides, I have a very good reason for needing to become the top student." But as the words left her lips, she suddenly sensed something, whipping her head around to look at Fernan. It seemed Fernan had noticed it too. Speaking slowly, "I feel them as well. A lot of them. At least 20. And that's just a rough estimate. And it looks like every single one of them is targeting us." Just as he finished speaking, dozens of figures emerged from the shadows, launching an attack on the pair without a single word. At the same time, another person wielding a massive blade charged forward. His primary target was Lunia. As he drew closer, she recognized his face. In an instant, terror flashed in her eyes. She never expected it would be Amion, but she didn't dare hesitate, raising her sword to defend. With a deafening boom, 2 powerful waves of energy collided, forcing them both apart. Amion stumbled back several steps, and Lunia did the same. She knelt on the ground, using her sword for support. But just 3 seconds later, they were charging at each other once again. Lunia's resolve was now unshakable, and on the other side, Amon's was just as firm. Just as Luther had ordered, he had to take her down first to prevent her from helping Fernan. In the blink of an eye, they were locked in a brutal melee. The constant, clanging ring of steel against steel echoed through the area. Just then, Luther suddenly appeared, already beginning to cast a spell. But before he could act, he sensed a new threat. Tendrils of dark magic shot in from a distance, forcing both Luther and Amion to leap backward. Luther, of course, refused to give up and charged forward again. Looking at his opponent, a smug smile spread across his face. Fernan saw his grin but remained silent. He focused on casting his spell. Boulders and rocks were ripped from the ground, flying through the air at his command. With a thunderous roar, a massive explosion rocked the clearing, forcing the other students to retreat. When the dust finally settled, Luther and Fernan stood apart. Luther was the first to speak. "I was just planning to stand by and watch. But you wiped out half of my pursuers in a single instant. Could you please try to be a little less violent? This ferocious fighting style isn't like you at all." Hearing this, Fernan feigned a helpless sigh. "I just wanted to try and win first place for once." Luther scoffed and sneered. "First place? Not a chance. How about we make a deal? There's less than an hour left in the test. If they were to fight right now, neither side would make it to the finish line in time." So, he proposed that he and Amion take first place, while Fernan could have second, a win-win for both parties. Fernan fell silent, considering the offer, but Lunia fiercely rejected it. "I'd rather lose in battle than just hand over first place without a fight." Fernan shrugged nonchalantly and smirked. "You heard her. My partner doesn't agree to your terms." Luther narrowed his eyes, staring at him for a long moment before his lips curled into a grin. "So, negotiations have failed, have they? Very well. Let's see what you've got." As he finished speaking, a ball of fire ignited in his hand. The men behind him also took their attack stances. But just then, Fernan suddenly smiled. "Let's save that for next time." His words left Luther completely bewildered. Before he could understand what was happening, a magic circle flared to life beneath their feet. In an instant, the ground collapsed, and massive walls of earth shot up around them, completely blocking their view. Seeing this, Luther yelled in a panic, "It's a trap! Everyone, run model!" But it was too late. The earth sealed itself shut, swallowing the other students whole. In that moment, Fan grabbed Lunia's shoulder, shouting, "Hey, we need to run!" Leaving the others to their fate, the two made a quick escape. A moment later, the combat test ended, and all the students were returned. Gralia stood on a high platform, her voice ringing out, "You all performed admirably. Now, I will announce the final rankings for the exam." In first place was, of course, Lunia and Fan, followed by Lur and Aeon in second. After the announcement, Fan raised an eyebrow with a smirk. "Looks like we actually took first place." But Lunia wasn't happy, pouting as she said, "Even though we're both skilled, we never actually defeated Amion. I don't think we deserve to be first." With a soft chuckle, Fan replied calmly, "First place is still first place. Does it matter if we beat them or not? Right?" Hearing that, Lunia's perspective shifted. She nodded and said, "Of course. This is my first time ever at the top. It feels amazing." While the two were talking, Grad spoke up again. "The examination is now over. We will return to the academy shortly, so don't wander off." Everyone stood in place, as ordered. Lunia lowered her voice to speak with Fan. "Do you know the new student, Thang?" Fan replied nonchalantly. "Of course, who doesn't?" Lunia paused in thought before saying, "Actually, I ran into him the other day." Fan's interest was piqued. "You met him?" Lunia nodded. "Yeah, I accidentally bumped into him during my nighttime training. The situation was pretty interesting. It was a lot like that time you spied on me during my sword practice." Her words struck Fan like a bolt of lightning, and a sudden, sharp pain shot through his head. Seeing him trembling, Lunia grew worried, but Fan couldn't answer her. He was seeing another prophecy. Another fragment of the future was being revealed to him. It was a scene where En asked Lunia to become his knight, but Lunia refused to take his hand. Then, the prophecy shifted to a different scene. The sky was blood red, the air thick with suffocating poison, and a terrifying demon appeared, signaling the end of the world. Fan realized the story had changed. In this vision, he saw Lunia standing protectively in front of someone. He could hear Lunia's words from the vision. "Inami, you asked me once before, didn't you? To be your knight. I refused you back then. But not anymore. Now I know who you are. And I know what you're fighting for. This is my destiny. A knight is the sword that strikes down her master's enemies, and the shield that protects him." And then, Lunia charged toward the demon, Andromalius. The more Fan saw, the more horrified he became. How? How can this be? The story changed again. After that battle, Lunia was gravely injured. On kept watch by her side, his face a mask of rage and tears, his hatred for the Flinby family growing deeper by the second. Hearing Anne's furious curses, Fan thought to himself, "That bastard. How dare you, that little punk." In a fit of explosive rage, Fan screamed the words aloud. He was stunned back to reality only when he realized his surroundings. Lunia and two instructors were standing before him, their faces filled with worry. Lunia asked urgently, "Are you okay? You suddenly collapsed. How are you feeling?" Fan just shook his head slightly. "I'm fine." "Really?" Rosalia then stepped forward to suggest, "Fan, perhaps you should go to the infirmary. You may have overused an ability you're not accustomed to." But Fan wasn't listening. His mind was consumed by the prophecy. So, from this moment on, En begins to see him as an enemy. But why did he receive another vision? It all revolved around Lunia again. Could it be showing him what's truly fated to happen? If that's true, then the name from the prophecy, Andromalius, one of the 72 great demons, is he really going to descend upon this world? And, in the near future, at that. A little while later, Hip arrived with a carriage to pick Fan up. As soon as he saw him, he offered praise. "Excellent work, young master. I heard you won first place." As Fan climbed into the carriage, he said, "I used up a ton of energy. I'm dead tired." Hip nodded and calmly suggested, "You should get some rest. When we arrive at Labatus Hall, I'll wake you." And with that, the carriage set off. Inside the carriage, Fan thought about Andromalius, the 72nd of the 72 demons. He had black hair and black eyes, appearing in human form, with a serpent coiled around his right arm. Even after scouring every book he could find, this was all the information available. The Great War with the demons was 1,000 years ago, so it was understandable that there were hardly any records left. In this era, The existence of demons was seen as nothing but a myth. 1,000 years ago, they were supposedly annihilated by the first emperor, and not one had been seen in this world since. Besides, even without any information, N could probably handle it, so it wasn't a huge cause for concern. However, the real problem was that Lunia would be severely injured in the battle with Andromalius. At that thought, Fan couldn't help but mutter anxiously, "Should I tell her about this? But even if I do, would she believe me?" He had already tried to mention something like this before. When he left the infirmary, Lunia had rushed over to ask, "Are you really okay?" Fan didn't answer her directly, only glancing at her as he began to speak. But more importantly, Lunia. "Do you believe that demons actually exist?" Finan ignored her question, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Just answer me. Do you believe, or not?" Seeing the fierce determination in his eyes, Lunia quickly answered, "Of course I believe. This empire was built upon the ashes of the demons we destroyed." Finan nodded slowly, his next words hanging heavy in the air. "Then what if I told you that demons still walk this land?" Lunia was stunned by his statement. A moment later, she looked at him as if he'd gone insane. In a low voice, she asked, "Did you take a blow to the head during training?" Back in the present, a critical thought struck Finan. If he could just find concrete proof of the demon's existence, he might be able to convince everyone. Exactly 1 month from today, during a sparring session for the first-year night class, N will defeat the second-ranked student, Varen. From that day on, no one in the academy will be able to match N's strength. But for all the glory of victor gains, the loser's despair is 100 times greater. Varen was crushed by the loss, and his resentment toward N slowly festered into a deep-seated hatred. To make matters worse, his powerful backer, Lugia, was deeply disappointed. Lugia abandoned Varen, causing his strongest pillar of support to collapse. With nothing left to lose, Varen was consumed by a demon that had slipped through the cracks. This would mark the first, albeit indirect, appearance of a demon. If Finan could skillfully exploit this event, convincing others and gaining their support would be far easier, and at that moment, he would have undeniable proof. Finan could use that as the foundation to launch his greater plan. The problem was, he didn't know the when, where, or how of Varen's demonic possession. The thought made Finan curse in frustration. Why wasn't this crucial part revealed to me? Will the details appear when the time is right, or is there some condition I have to meet first? This is so frustrating. Meanwhile, in N's room, he was reading through the Academy's information, unable to hide his admiration. As expected of the House of Penbox. Say what you will, but Bokjipe is still Bokjipe, even after they lost their military might. Gainer, standing beside him, spoke up fiercely. It's only thanks to Bokjipe that the flashy House of Penbox even bothered to act in the first place. On frowned at those words. "You seem to think highly of House Bokjipe, don't you?" Gainer scoffed. "Don't you dare compare the two. The only knight who could stand with me and the late emperor on the battlefield was a man from House Bokjipe," and watched him intently, hesitating before he spoke. "But these days, people hold the Penbox family in much higher regard." Those words enraged Gainer. "And that's exactly why we live in a fallen age. If it weren't for Penbox's war funds during the 1,000-Year War, you think I'd ever get involved with those new money nobles?" As he spoke, an idea suddenly sparked in his mind. "That's right, N," he said urgently. "Go ask that kid for some money." N was completely bewildered by the suggestion. He asked cautiously, "What? Why so suddenly?" Gainer put on a mysterious expression. "Hasn't that Penbox kid been treating you unusually well?" He was certain Finan wanted to establish a connection with Amion. House Penbox never reveals what they want directly. They build trust to make you lower your guard, and then they finally reel you in. On furrowed his brow at the accusation. "Are you saying Senior Finan approached me with impure motives? But my family is in ruins. What could he possibly want from me?" Hearing this, Gainer exploded in anger. "Why are you so damn insecure? Besides, his motive doesn't matter. What matters is that we can use him to our advantage."